Toda, Sigalit, and United Airlines. I flew on United. Where's the United guy? Oh, you're the United person. Okay, good, cool. I love United. It's great. I was very happy to see your logo. Cool. Erev Tov. Manishma. Sababa. Good. Good. It's great to spend the evening with you. That's all the Hebrew. Well, it's not quite all the Hebrew you're going to get. You're going to get a little bit more. I know some technical terms, right? Like ייעוד. Good. So we're going to spend the evening talking about purpose, and we're going to talk about purpose in a couple different contexts. We're going to talk about individual purpose. We're going to talk about purpose and leadership. How many of you are leaders? Raise your hand. Good. We're going to talk about purpose in organizations. How many of you lead organizations? You're in an executive role in a company. Good. And we're even going to talk about purpose in Israel a little bit towards the end. That'll be fun. Good. So I like purpose in lots of different flavors. But people always remind me I have to say a little bit about myself. I tend to forget myself because I get really excited about the topic. So just a few words about myself, how I got into the whole area of purpose in the first place. I started out as a techno geek, computer math guy. So my degree is in theoretical math from MIT. And I used to program computers for Oracle Corporation. Any of you have a technology background? Your fellow geeks out there? Good. Cool. I worked my way up pretty high. I was working for a guy who was working for Larry Ellison. It's a big organization, so that's pretty high. And I ran out of steam. And I realized that getting higher in the organization wasn't going to make me happier. Because the guy I was working for was not happier than I was. He actually looked less happy. If you know anything about Larry Ellison, you can kind of connect the dots. I'll leave it as an exercise to the student. That kind of blew up my plan, right? Because I was on the sort of the regular kind of, I wasn't sure what my purpose was or what life was about, but I figured I might as well get ahead in business and become successful, and that would do for now. So I had my midlife crisis at age 31. And so now I'm definitely going to live longer than 60. That was not that was not halfway through. But it turns out that's actually a trend, and we'll talk about that later, that people are having their midlife crises younger and younger. How many of you have had one already? Yeah, ooh, a lot of hands. Good. Right, when you're living in your parents' basement and you're 25, you're having it early, right? So that's actually now a friend of mine who also does purpose work with college students calls it a quarter life crisis. Right? So you're 22, 23, 24. Good. Cool. So that started me on a whole quest because I realized that I couldn't get a computer or a math problem or even my own brain to solve the particular problem I was experiencing, which was a complete and total lack of motivation. That was the problem I was experiencing. So I had to find some way to solve this problem, and I eventually started taking workshops, and I left Oracle to go learn to lead workshops. And eventually got back in technology and back into working with business leaders, but after a long detour through a deep psychological and spiritual exploration. How many of you have done some of that work? Mom claims you have you? A little bit, okay, good. Hand goes up, sorry, all right. Good. So that led me to a lot of realizations that I then put into practice in my own leadership and in the leadership of my clients. And through the unfolding of and manifestation of my own purpose in life led me to working with CEOs and billionaires and politicians, heads of NGOs, military leaders, generals and chiefs of staff and things like that. Many of them actually here in Israel. And when we get into the purpose of the country, I'll explain why that is. Because a lot of times Israelis look at me and they say, "Why are you here, Tim? Why did you come all this way to work with us? What's that about?" We'll talk about that at the end. Cool. So you guys interested in this topic? You ready to dive in? And okay, we're going to start with the personal purpose stuff, and then we're going to talk about the others later, because the personal purpose stuff is the easiest to understand, and it's easier to understand the leadership purpose and the organizational purpose and the national purpose if you have some grasp on the individual purpose first. So that's the order we're going to do it in. You guys cool with that? Any objections? Good, unanimous decision. I always like making unanimous decisions with Israelis because they believe it can't be done. Good. So, here we go. Why would you want to know your purpose? Why would you want to know your purpose? To be more motivated? Clarity, like clarity, good. Direction. Purpose is very good. It's like a compass, gives you a direction, yeah. What's that? Good. Having an idea of what you want to do, very helpful for that, yes. Gives meaning to what you do. Now that's interesting. This is an important point. Sometimes people find their purpose and keep doing exactly the same thing and are much happier because now they have meaning attached to the thing that they were doing, which before they were doing without meaning. Good. Anyone else? Yeah. Focus. And the woman behind you? To not waste time. Aha. Especially as people get into the midlife crises, they start realizing, gee, I only have so much time left. I want to get busy on that purpose if that's going to happen. Right? Good. Here are some of the benefits. Those are motivations. These are slightly different. They're related. So we already talked about meaning, right? And you can use purpose at work or not. That's a personal decision. I'm a huge fan of using it at purpose, but you don't have to. Now, purposeful people age slower. This is interesting. And they've actually shown that they're less likely to get Alzheimer's disease. This is one of the things that's been categorically proven about people who are living their purpose, less likely to get Alzheimer's disease. It's one of the very few things that has any effect on Alzheimer's disease at all. More money, because purpose makes people happy, and happier people earn more money. They've known for a long time that people who earned money were happier than more money, were more happy than people who earned less money. I kind of garbled that, but you got the idea, right? What they thought was that earning money made people happy. But they found that when you give people money, it doesn't make them happier, which was confusing. So lottery winners, for example, have a higher suicide rate than the rest of the population. Did any of you know that? That's an interesting fact, isn't it? Higher suicide rate, lottery winners. Not the ones who are losing, the ones who are winning. It turns out that being happy causes you to earn money. Not that earning money makes you happy. It's the other way around. That's easy to see if you think about having two people work for you, one who's bitter and miserable and complaining all the time, and the other one who comes to work happy every day, eager to do whatever it is that they need to do. Which one are you more likely to promote? Which one are you more likely to give a raise or bonus to? It's pretty obvious when you look at it that way. Right? Cool. So, what is a purpose? And again, we're talking here about ייעוד, a higher purpose, right? Because you could have any kind of purpose. I could have my purpose for being here tonight, my purpose for ordering this off the menu, the purpose of our meeting. Right? We're talking a little bigger scale than that. Yeah, like calling. Good. What would be some other synonyms or ways you might phrase purpose? How would you define it? Destiny, calling, those are good. Anyone else? Goal, mission, vision, aims, these are great words. Purpose? I think that's a little circular. I actually had a teacher do that once. He was saying, okay, your mission defines your purpose defines your vision. I said, could you define each of those? And he says, yes. Your mission defines your purpose defines your vision. I was like, no, forget it, never mind. Good. So I would say, it answers the question, who am I? Why am I here? That's the fundamental one. Right? We're talking about the purpose of an individual. And what is the greatest positive impact I could have on the world? Another way of saying that would be, what am I meant to do? Now, some people get wrapped around the axle on the word meant. Don't sweat it. We'll sort it out. But fundamentally, I would say purpose is the answer. A life purpose for an individual is the answer to the question, why am I here? And these bottom two here, who am I? That's a being question. And how do I have a greater impact, or what am I meant to do? That's a doing question, and both are relevant. So there's a being element to purpose and a doing element to purpose. Does that make sense? Cool. So, here's where some of you more skeptical folks may find a place to latch on here before we dive in deep here. So some people believe that I have a purpose and I'm seeking it. And other people believe that I don't have any purpose at all, but I want to choose one because I think I might be better off with one than without one. Difference make sense to you? So people in the first group think it's already there, like it's a feature designed in. The people in the second group don't believe there's any innate or inherent purpose, but they might want one anyway. Okay? So raise your hand if you're in group A. I already have a purpose. I may or may not know what it is, but it's there. Okay, good. Raise your hand if you're in group B. I don't have a purpose until I decide I have a purpose. Good. So that makes a purpose more like a value or a goal in that you choose one. Okay? Now, for those of you in group A, you're set. Just hold tight for a moment. I'm going to talk to group B for a moment. All you folks who raised your hand on the I have to choose or create a purpose, is it true that different purposes might work differently, i.e. some might function better than others? Yes, okay. So if I chose two of them, one might be more motivating, say, than another, or more inspiring than another. Okay, so it matters which one I pick. Anyone in group B think it makes no difference whatsoever which purpose you pick? I've met a total of maybe 4 or 5 people who raised their hands on this one. You believe it makes no difference whatsoever? Good. So he's got the easiest job in the room. Seriously. Because he can pick any purpose he wants and it will work equally well. For the rest of you, you have an optimization problem. Right? You have to figure out, if they don't work the same, you have to figure out which one's going to work best for you and then pick that one. Does that make sense? Again, group A, close your ears, nothing to do with you. Good. So except for him, the rest of you are still going to be asking a question, because he can do whatever he wants, right? Save himself a lot of time and energy. But for the rest of you, in group B, the question, instead of what is my purpose, like what's the purpose that's already there, that's group A's question. Group B's question is, which purpose would work best for me so that I can pick that one? Make sense? Good. So if you're in group A, we're looking for the purpose that's already there. And if you're in group B, we're looking for the purpose that would work best for you. Yes, sir? You can choose 2 or 3. That's fine. Might be a little distracting. Right, so it's sort of like a company having 10 strategic goals. The odds of succeeding at any one of them goes down. Oh yeah, no, they change. They change. There's actually good reason to allow it to evolve, for sure. Yeah, you don't have to stick with one through your whole life. But I'm saying having 2 or 3 or 4 at the same time might not work that well. Does that make sense? Yeah, good. Cool. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about methods in a minute, but first I want to get clear about where we're looking for the information. So I'm going to call the part of you that I'm talking to right now, the part that's saying, yeah, I want to know my purpose, or I want to figure out which purpose will work best. The part that chose to come here tonight and paid whatever shekels it was and all that kind of stuff, drove your car. I'm calling that your ego, okay? Which probably makes sense to most of you, right? Or you could call it your conscious mind would be another term for that. Okay, a little brief dip into psychology here. So if your conscious mind is the part that's asking the question, and we don't know the answer must be the unconscious. Okay? So there's other stuff that's true about you that you're not consciously aware of, like forgotten things, suppressed things, things you never knew. Any of you ever discover you had a belief you didn't know you had? You've ever had that happen? Yeah, or have a memory surface. It was like, I had no idea I'd forgotten that for 20 or 30 years. Right? Things recede into the unconscious and then come back later sometimes. Sometimes not. So if I want to know my purpose or I want to choose a purpose, and I'm not sure which one, that means the information I'm seeking is in the unconscious. Does that make sense? Already in there, already exists, and I don't know it. Okay, you guys got awfully quiet. Am I probing too deeply into your psyche? Okay, good. Cool, so the purpose is down there somewhere. And the question is, how do I move it from down there up into the conscious part so I can use it in decision making and act on it? Make sense? Good. So, how do I do that? Well, there's doing it by accident. Any of you ever trip over a purpose by accident? I have. Good, yeah, happens. Good. Very fortunate when it occurs, right? A lot of CEOs find their purpose this way. I do some speaking and consulting with an organization called Conscious Capitalism. I think they started a chapter here in Israel now. And a lot of the CEOs are huge fans of purpose, and they get up on stage and talk about their purpose, and you ask them how they found it, they were like taking a shower or had a car accident or something like that, and then they found their purpose. Good. Indirect methods are the most common way of finding your purpose. And in indirect methods, what you do is you try to figure out, based on the answers to a bunch of different questions, what your purpose might be. So examples of questions would be, what are the things you feel most passionate about? Or what are the things that when you lose track of time, what is it you're actually doing? Like you just forget about time and get in a state of flow. What are the things you're doing when that happens? When you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up? Right? These are questions that sort of point in the general direction of purpose. You get that idea? If you had a year to live, or if you won the lottery, what would you do? If you knew you couldn't fail, what would you do? So you'll take a workshop or hire a coach or read a book, and it'll ask you a bunch of these questions, and you write down all the answers, and then the game is you look through the answers for clues to purpose. And here's how that works. It's actually an important feature of purpose, which is that people, just sort of wandering through their life, have experiences of being off purpose and of being on purpose, more or less accidentally. Okay? So when someone is on purpose, when you're doing what you're meant to do, when you're doing the thing that is most motivating and inspiring for you, like when you know that this is what you're meant to do, what is the feeling experience of that? What is it like to be in that state? Usually it lasts for weeks or months if you get things lined up right. It's exciting, it's happy, passionate, lots of enthusiasm. What's that? Revealing. Good, you learn things about yourself in that state that you may not have known. Inner silence. Good, it can actually get very quiet inside. There's a lot of noise that gets generated when you're not in that state. Yes? High energy. Good. Now, yes? It can be a little scary. How many of you have ever gotten nervous in that state? Like it was a little too good? Yeah. There's a feeling of acceleration. Sometimes people are like, oh my God. Ah. Right? That much inspiration and motivation can be a little overwhelming to the ego. So if I'm in that state, how do other people react towards me? What are they likely to do? They want to follow. They want to be part of it. They want to rub up against me and catch whatever I've caught. Right? I want what she's having. Right? Give me some of that. Right? So actually, if you're a leader, you can get benefit from living your own purpose as a leader without even telling anybody what it is. Right? So I've worked with Israeli politicians. I'm sworn not to tell you which ones. And they don't reveal their purpose to the world. Sometimes they'll reveal bits of it without saying it's their purpose. But they can actually get themselves in a state where other people want to follow them, even without telling those people what their purpose is, because of how it changes who they're being while they're leading. CEOs, same thing. Good. Does that make sense that someone would want to do that? So that's one strategy as a leader for using purpose, is to use your own individual purpose, get purposeful, and don't talk about it. Right? If you're feeling shy. Good. Now what happens when I'm off purpose? I've set my goal and it's over here. I've chosen my purpose poorly. Okay? What does this feel like? Most people have been in this state at one time or another. Frustrating. Weakening. Stuck. Feeling stuck. Good. Good. It feels like a waste of time. It's actually a lot of energy being spent with very little results being produced in this state. This state's the opposite. Little energy produces a lot of result. Good. What else does it feel like over here? Good. Confusion, loss of direction, uncertainty. What's that? Frustration. Good. Now, how do other people behave when I'm in this state? What's that? They like you? They act like you. Good. So other people who are similarly miserable may stick around, but the ones who want to have a good time will move to a safe distance. Because you can actually, we'll get to that in a minute, but yeah. So people don't want to follow you when you're in this state, fundamentally. Your close friends and relatives will try to give you advice and try to help you and fix you if you're in that state, but they're not going to follow you. That make sense? Good. And you can stay in the state for a long time. What happens if you stay in the state for a really long time? You get depressed, and eventually, if you really stick to it, yeah, you can get car accidents, diseases, like all kinds of really horrible things can happen if you stay in this state long enough. Anyone ever done that? You stayed in that one right off the cliff? Did that one? A few of you. Good, not too many. Glad to see it. Good. There's another interesting feature you can use. And by the way, here's a little practical tool you'll be able to take from this workshop. I've been told that Israelis need lots of practical tools in any lecture. Is that true? Have to have practical tools. Otherwise, the lecture didn't happen, right? Okay, good. Practical tool number 1 coming up. So, the other thing that happens is probability behaves differently in these two different states. You know, Murphy's Law, that which can go wrong will go wrong, that happens over here. Right? Even stuff you should be good at starts to fail. Over here, it's the reverse, right? As you arrive at the intersection, the light turns green. The door opens. Actually, people will show up out of nowhere to help you when you're in this state. Right? I have people in my company who have volunteered several hours per week, right, for-profit company, for years, unpaid. Just showing up to help with our purpose. Right? So people will help you when you're in this state. And they'll behave as if they were sent to help you sometimes. Hi, I've been sent to help. Good. So you can actually detect the degree to which you're on purpose by the degree to which you're in those two different states. Does that make sense? So after hearing what I just said, most people can very accurately determine how on purpose they are in their life right now. Pretty quickly. Just by their own felt experience of their life, how passionate and fulfilled they feel, how much resistance they experience, internal and external, when they're trying to do things. Very quickly, people can tell it. This is the practical tool. So I want you to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 is over here, right? I know I'm way off track, and the universe is sending me messages to try to let me know. And over here, like, I'm so inspired, it's a little scary. That would be a 5. Okay? So raise your hand, 1 to 5. How purposeful are you in your life? I'm about a 4 currently. Somewhere between a 3.5 and a 4. A lot of 3s. Was that a 1 there? No? Good. We got 2.5. Okay, we got a lot of 2s, 3s, and 4s. Not seeing any 5s. Good. Actually, the average, there's a 5. Excellent. He's got a big smile on his face, too. You can tell he's telling the truth. Good. Was that a 1-finger salute? Okay. And how did I earn that? Oh, it's your 1. Okay, I thought you were, no. Okay. Thinking, interesting way of voting. All right, it was a 1. Okay, I missaw it. Good. Good. So most of you it looked like the group average was somewhere around 3.5, which is pretty good. Right? So that means you're in relatively good shape. The good news about that is that if you're not suffering, finding your purpose is optional. And that's actually the most fun time to find your purpose, is when you don't have to. If you wait until you're suffering, then it becomes a much less pleasant experience and more urgent. Does that make sense? But again, only if you want to, right? Many of the people I work with are doing great, and they want to do better. Right? They want their company to be more successful, they want to be a better leader, they want to change the world, and that's why they're looking for their purpose. A smaller number of people who hire me have lost their jobs, they've been divorced by their spouse, they've been diagnosed with a disease, something like that, and they're trying to use their purpose to fix that situation. That's the less fun way to do it. Right? Those are the people over here doing the 1s and the 2s. Good. So this is used as a technique because I can look for all the places where I've been in this state and connect the dots and try to find my purpose from that. It's a little approximate for my taste. It's a little rough. Usually what you get from that is a purpose statement like, my purpose is to help people, or my purpose is to leave the world a better place than I found it, or my purpose is to teach, or something like that. Which may work fine for that person. Remember, I'm a technology guy. I want that. I actually had a lot of trouble with engineering, because the reason I went for theoretical math over engineering is more practical, I couldn't stand the approximations. It drove me bats. I needed the exact answers, right? That's why I did theoretical math. You can find, in the theoretical world, you can find exact answers. Right? So I prefer exact purpose answers instead of rough ones, especially if I'm going to make life decisions based on it. Good. Cool. And for that reason, I favor what are called direct methods. And direct methods is a method where I'm actually consulting something that already knows my purpose. And I'm going to do a slightly simplified version of this. We have a whole one day where we spend it just pretty much on this. But the idea is that if the answer to the question, what is my purpose, or for those of you in group B, the answer to the question, which purpose would work best for me, is in my unconscious, rather than trying to figure out what it is, maybe I can just ask my unconscious and have it tell me. So in this method, finding your purpose becomes a conversation between a part of you that doesn't know what it is, asking a part of you that does know what it is, and that part tells you. Now, we have to go through some work to create conditions under which that can occur, but once you get all that conditions set up, then it's pretty quick. Usually for most people it takes about half an hour. Now, it takes a day to create the conditions, but but the actual asking, and actually the record for this method was set by my son a couple months ago. He was determined, he's 14, he was not yet 15, and he was determined to find his purpose when he was 14, because he knew that the record for using direct methods was 14 years old. And so he wanted to at least tie the record. He said, Dad, you should have told me when I was 13. So the record previously was held by a rabbi who lives near Jerusalem, which was 20 minutes. My son broke his record, 12 minutes, start to finish the entire process. Right? For most people, it takes either one-on-one 1 day or in a workshop setting 3 days. Right? These are people who are able to find their purpose without experiencing fear about it. We'll get more into that later. Good. So it can be pretty quick. Good. So you ask the part of you that knows what is my purpose, and it says, glad you asked. It's blah, 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 and explains it to you. That's how it works. Much more efficient than trying to figure it out. Cool. We don't need to do this. These are fun, but we don't need to go through them. Let's see. Direct methods, good. We'll talk about the direct ones. So meditation and active imagination are the two most commonly used ones. These are the ones we use in our workshop, the first and third. And the reason is that they have the highest chances of success. Those two work about 80% of the time, each of them individually. And so if you combine them and do a few other little tricks, we can get 90% of people to have their purpose within 3 days. We've done this in organizations as well as in, public workshops. It works consistently. The only place we had lower than 90% was in a kibbutz. Any kibbutzim out there? No. Good few. Don't know what to tell you. It was a rough workshop. Good. And so when we're doing it in a corporate setting, we let the group choose the method that they're going to use. And usually they're going after the company purpose, not their own. Good. So these are some individual purpose examples. I'll give you some company ones later. This is actually an Israeli CEO. I help leaders and organizations achieve results they believe are impossible. He had recently left a CEO job at a company. This is actually an interesting engagement story. He moved to Thailand because he, cashed out, had a bunch of money, moved to Thailand, hung out on the beach, and lasted about 3 weeks before he had to come back and find another job. Didn't need the money. Why do you think he came back? Meaning and purpose, right? There's a problem with being on permanent vacation. Because if you're not making any contribution to society, it actually has a negative effect on your self-esteem over a long enough period of time. This is why very wealthy people get involved in philanthropy, right? Bill Gates doesn't have to work. His great-grandchildren don't have to work. He's working all the time. Why? Meaning. We'll talk more about that later. Right, so he came back and hired me, found this purpose, and when he was in job interviews with people, I told him, so when they ask you what you do, answer with your purpose. It's a great tip. And they said, so tell us about you and what kind of leader you are. And he said, I help leaders and organizations achieve results they believe are impossible. They said, oh, well, we need one of those. Now, interestingly, that wouldn't make him an automatic hire in most companies. Why not? You'd think arrogance would be a problem. If you're actually saying your purpose and it's real, people don't usually have that experience. People react as if they're being arrogant when they say their purpose. Other people don't usually have that reaction. Interestingly, most companies are not looking for runaway growth. They do not want to rapidly double or triple in size and achieve amazing results. Many of them want a leader who's going to keep things more or less the way they are. Now, they're not going to say that. They may not even know it consciously. But if they hired a guy like him and he started suddenly doing all this great stuff and changing things and making it grow, they might try to stop him. So part of what he was doing, saying this purpose, was testing the organization to make sure that they actually wanted to grow that much. Otherwise, he would be a hazard to himself and others as a CEO. I have one of my buddies who I've trained in my methodology, I've trained a few thousand people, is actually a headhunter. And he knows that finding the purpose of the individual is one of the best measures of whether they'll be successful in a job or not. Is that role aligned with this person's purpose, yes or no? Good. Cool. I Heal Men's Broken Hearts. That's a coach I met in Phoenix, Arizona. I was giving a talk like this one, but it was longer. And often when I give a talk, if I talk long enough, someone in the audience will find their purpose. It's sort of a side effect of my field. Someone will go, ha, I found my purpose. Right, so she found hers during the talk, and this was it. Right? Now this is interesting because this actually illustrates something called purposeful marketing. The first one does too. Right? So she's a coach. So if she goes around saying, I'm a coach, which a lot of people do, that's actually terrible marketing. How many of you sell and deliver services yourself? You're a solopreneur. Yeah, don't say I'm a consultant, I'm a coach. Terrible, terrible marketing. Right? I'm a financial advisor. It's awful. So instead of saying I'm a coach, she says this. What do? I heal men's broken hearts. That's great marketing. Right? If you're a man with a broken heart, you're either running away or reaching for your phone to get her number. And if you know a man with a broken heart, you're immediately thinking, oh, I know someone I need to introduce you to. Cool. I show people their true selves. Good. These also illustrate an important difference. A lot of people get confused and think that a purpose is a profession. They're not the same. You manifest a purpose through a profession. Two people doing the same business activity maybe have completely different purposes, and maybe you're both fulfilled by it for totally different reasons. Does that make sense? And you could take the same purpose and manifest it through multiple different business activities. One of my first purposes was I show people the way, or I show people their path. It's evolved since then, like this gentleman said. But I did that as a navigator in the Navy for 23 years. I was an awesome navigator. I'm a level 3 Waze map editor. And I help individuals, leaders, organizations, and countries find their higher purpose. Those are all activities that are expressions of the same purpose. Do you see that? So standing on the bridge of a ship with a sextant shooting stars at the level of purpose is the same as what I'm doing with you right now. So you don't have to change jobs when you find your purpose. A lot of people get freaked out about it, don't want it. Well, I'm not ready to change jobs, so I don't want to find my purpose. No. Find your purpose, express it through the job you already have. Cool. This is too technical. We'll worry about this another time. Good. Why doesn't everyone already know their purpose? Actually, that's true. Many people don't ask themselves. But even people who do often ask themselves the question over and over again, sometimes for years. I did for 20 years. How many of you have been asking yourself the question, what is my purpose, for a while? Good. So in some cases, you're right. But those of us who do ask, why don't we know? Why don't we get an answer? What's in the way? Life? Life is in the way? It can be distracting. Your ego's in the way. He's right. What's that? Worries, yes. Fears, worries, anxiety about the things that will go wrong if you find and live your purpose. Like, can anyone come up with one? Good. So if I find and live my purpose, I won't make enough money. What else? I'll fail at my purpose. Then my life will be completely meaningless because I'll have failed at the thing I'm supposed to do. My children, what about children? Children are in fear. Give me the whole fear. I'll let down my family. Great. Whole sentence. I'm getting words. So what's the fear about self-confidence? Good, I won't be able to achieve my purpose, right? Failure. I have to do it immediately. Good, I must do something about it, and I don't have time to do something about it now, so I'll find it later. Good. Good, I'll focus on my purpose and lose the stuff I already have. These are great. Yes? Distraction. Good, so I will be distracted. Most people are distracted from finding their purpose. After you find it, you're in a better condition, which is being distracted from manifesting it. Right? That's actually a better position to be in. Good, so all of these reasons, doubts and limiting beliefs. Also, I've heard some of you Israelis are a tad skeptical. Is this true? A few of you. Okay, good. So if you have doubts, limiting beliefs, and with any luck, I've raised some of them during this talk. How many of you had a skeptical reaction at some point during the talk? Raise your hand, be honest. Good, oh, almost half. I'm doing fairly well. All right, good. I have to get the level a little higher. All right, so all of these things come up and explain to you why you shouldn't or can't or won't know your purpose, or why you shouldn't or can't or won't manifest it once you know it. And you can stay in that state for a long time. As I said, I stayed in that state for 20 years. Wanting to know it, afraid of what it might mean, and unable to know it. It's a very stable psychological state. So you have to do something to get out of that state. The other issue, which isn't on the slide, is that people imagine that they should be able to do it on their own. How many of you have that thought? Well, if I don't know my purpose, I must be doing something wrong. Why, you know. Now, they don't have that imagination about doing oral surgery on themselves or fixing their engine in their car if it fails, right? Or maybe something goes horribly wrong with their computer. For those, they'll hire a professional. But for finding their purpose, they somehow imagine that they ought to be able to do it on their own with no training whatsoever, which then gets you into a sort of negative self-esteem loop that can be hard to get out of. It's a technical process, and there are things that work and things that don't, and it's something you can learn to do. And once you know how to do it, it's easy. And after that, as your purpose evolves, you can find it again on your own. But if you don't know the procedure, then it's really hard, just like brain surgery. So this is another obstacle, is people's imagination that they should be able to just do it. Cool. And a little word about Maslow here. I'm going to give you a tip. This is another way of, this is a practical tool for greatly decreasing the resistance to finding your purpose. So, where does purpose live on our buddy Maslow's pyramid? At the top, up in self-actualization, right? So purpose is up there. Self-actualization is sort of like be all that you can be. Later, Maslow added another layer. Anyone remember what that was? Yeah, it was self-transcendence or self-fulfillment or something like that. This was where people's needs are met sufficiently that they now start to worry about the needs of others. This would be like Bill Gates, where it's no longer concerned primarily about myself and now starting to concern myself with others. Okay, good. So it's at self-actualization and self-transcendence that purpose lives. Now, if I say, gee, if I don't earn my purpose, if I find my purpose, I won't earn enough money. Where's money at in this pyramid? Safety. Now, which takes precedence, the top or the bottom? The bottom is the higher priority needs, which means if it's a choice between money and purpose, your psyche will automatically choose money. So, here's the way to make it really hard to find your purpose, which is to say to yourself, and some of you have done this, I want to find my purpose, and whatever it is, I'll do it. How many of you have said some version of that to yourself? I want to find my purpose, and whatever it is, I'll do it. That makes it much harder to find it, because it makes it less safe. It's like signing the contract before you read it. Instead of saying, well, I'd love to know what it is so I can decide whether I feel like it or not. To make sure that it doesn't mess up all the other stuff I already have working in my life. And that's the smart way to do it. So after people do a purpose workshop, we encourage them to start working on their purpose in small ways immediately and leave the big stuff for later. Because when people rush off to manifest their purpose, all full of inspiration, usually they screw up their lives. Right? They divorce their spouse or walk off their job or something like that and make a balagan. There's another Hebrew word for you. Good. Cool. Does that make sense? So practical tip number 2, finding your purpose then leads to a decision. Do I want to do that? Yes or no? And no is a perfectly legitimate answer. Right? You're doing fine already. Most of you are 3s or 4s. No reason to throw all that away. Good. Cool. What does it create? Relief from fear and doubt. Now this is an interesting one. The direct methods do this. The other ones don't. Remember I told you were going to ask a part of you that already knows your purpose what it is, and it was going to tell you? Once you get that connection working, it's like intuition on steroids. Because you can ask that part all kinds of stuff. A lot of leaders work with me so they can have that. Greatly increased decision-making skill, because logic is dependent on data. Right? To make a really good, rational, logical decision, you need a lot of really good data. And things are moving and changing so rapidly, often there isn't enough time to get enough data to make a really good, rational decision. So if you have really great intuition, you don't have to wait. You can make the decision now. And later people will say, well, how did you know? How did you know it was going to turn out? I didn't know it was going to turn out that way. How did you know to go that way? My intuition told me. I want what he's having. Cool. Knowing why you're here. Greater positive impact. This is a biggie. And this is one of the things that results in more pay. People who are living their purpose produce greater results, have a greater impact, and are therefore a more valuable resource. More powerful leaders, more valuable employees. Questions about this, and then we'll talk a little about leadership, organizational, and national purpose. Stunned silence. So the direct methods, what we're trying to do is create, the question was to explain them in more detail. So if we're doing it in a workshop setting, let's say this were a 3-day workshop, on the morning of the first day probably, we would have people select a name for whatever part of themselves they think already knows their purpose. Okay. So can you humor me and come up with a name? Rachel. Okay. Now is that your name? It's your second name. Okay, so Rachel is going to mean, in this conversation, the part of you that's already clear about your purpose. Now, were you in group A or group B? Group A. Okay, so you believe you already have a purpose. So in this case, Rachel knows what it is, you don't. Or you maybe have a rough idea, but she's got a more clear idea. Okay? Just, you can lie, it's just an example. Okay? Good. So now what we want to do is create conditions where you can have a conversation with Rachel and ask Rachel questions about your purpose. So the 2 ways that work best to do that, the 2 that I named on that slide, one was a guided visualization, right? We turn down the lights, we put on some music, you all close your eyes. And you ever done a meditation like that where the person's speaking and like you're walking through the woods or something? Great. We do one of those. And so you go to a clearing in the woods and you invite Rachel, and Rachel shows up. She may not be dressed the way you expect, who knows. And so the 2 of you have a conversation. Hey, Rachel, tell me about my purpose. And Rachel answers questions. And then when you wake up, you write them down. Now, when you write them down, you may have no idea whether those are accurate or not, but you write them down anyway. Okay? Good. That's method 1. And the other method, what we call written active imagination, is where you don't have to put on music and close your eyes. In this one, you write out a conversation. Here's practical tool number 3. Any of you can do this anytime. It's great for talking to different parts of yourself, not just the part that knows your purpose. Any of you ever done any parts work? Voice dialogue or NLP or anything like that? Yeah, good. So this is a good way to do it by yourself. Right? You know that there's like multiple voices in your head, right? You ever notice that? So if you think the answer is no, remember the last time you made a really big decision, one that took days. Can you remember them arguing in your head? Okay, those are the voices in your head. So, what you do then is you write out a conversation with Rachel. You write your name, and then you write a question, then you write Rachel, and then you write an answer. And you just write like that. Okay? Drives your inner skeptical part completely bats, but it works 80% of the time. Okay? So that's the other really high probability technique. In either case, when we're done, we want to test and see whether we really got Rachel or not, and whether we really got your purpose or not. So we have something like 27 different criteria we use to tell whether it was really an appropriate source for the information. And I think it's 9 or 10 tests whether it's an accurate purpose or not. Does that help? Good. Thank you. Other questions about individual purpose before we go into these other areas? Yes, ma'am. So are you in group B? Good. So in your case, it doesn't already know your purpose. I keep switching back and forth in the language to address both groups. In your case, it's not the part that already knows your purpose because you don't have one. It's the part that knows of all the purposes you could choose, which one would work best for you. Right, so remember I said you have an optimization problem? This part has the answer to the optimization problem. It says, you want a good purpose? Pick this one. Don't like that one? Here's number 2. So that way you don't have to use trial and error to figure out which one to use, which is how most people do it. That make sense? Much more efficient. Good. And we can test to see whether the answer it gave you will work or not. You don't have to spend a year doing it. Good. Yes? Good. What happens when you fulfill your purpose? Do you need to find a new one? Short answer, yes. If you've been at your purpose for a few years, one of the side effects of that is you grow and evolve. Right? You become more capable as a result of living that purpose. Any of you ever done that? Like you ever took a job and at the beginning it was like really difficult and everything, and after a few years it was like, hey, this is easy, right? The job didn't change. What changed? You changed. You became more powerful and more capable. Ideally, that's happening all the time. This, by the way, is one of the strategies companies used for motivating employees. It's called a learning organization, where you engage all the employees in growing and developing at the fastest pace that they're willing to. It's really good for them and it's great for the company. Okay? So your purpose is actually a personal growth and development plan. You will have to grow and evolve to become capable of fulfilling that purpose. That's one of the reasons why it's scary at first. You look at it and say, wow, I can't do that. True, not yet. Who would you have to become in order to fulfill that purpose? So as you evolve into the person who actually could do that purpose, you need a new one. Because the original one will cease to be as motivating. So what we recommend is that every year or two, you test your purpose statements to make sure they're still powerful. And we expect that they start to fade, and then you get new ones. Which, if you've been through this methodology once, you can do on your own if you follow the procedure properly. Some people still want help, but it's possible to do it yourself if you've done it properly the first time. Yes? Oh, I didn't say that once you found your purpose, there would be no obstacles. I never said that. Oh, there's more hurdles than just people around you. There's lack of resources, there's all sorts of obstacles. But interestingly, in my experience, the external obstacles actually are symbolic of internal obstacles. Any of you ever found that to be true? Like you shifted something in yourself and the external person stopped being in your way? You can usually do something internal which at the very least increases your capacity to deal with the external obstacle. Absolutely not immune to the trials and tribulations of the world. Clear sense of direction, a strategy, some methodology, some support from this internal source of wisdom that you found as to how to navigate around that obstacle. Right? The ability to learn and grow from dealing with the obstacle. But no, there are still obstacles, absolutely. Absolutely, good. In my experience, fewer. When I'm off purpose, the obstacles start to multiply. In my experience, luck favors the person who's on purpose. And it's actually a predictable, sufficiently predictable side effect that we actually use it. Remember I told you there were tests of purpose? That's one of the tests. Which is, I've had clients, they learn the purpose and they say, this can't possibly be right, Tim. I say, well, humor me. Go out and do this for a week or two and tell me what happens. And they come back and they're like, oh my God, you won't believe what happens. And they start talking about all these weird experiences they had of strange, unlikely things that showed up to support them while they were doing it. And then I remind them, I said, I told you that would happen. And they're like, yeah, I know, but I didn't believe you. Right? So that's actually so consistent that we use it as a test of the purpose. Now, you don't have to believe me at all. But I encourage you to conduct a personal experiment, N=1, to see if it's true for you too. Because lots of people report this phenomenon. No need to believe me, and I'm not going to argue with you. Good. Cool, yes? Yeah, so the book is called True Purpose, and I've trained, we kind of lost track because I have other people doing the training now, but somewhere around 2,000 coaches, therapists, consultants, career counselors in this particular methodology, and they practice it all over the world. And because of that, I actually don't know how many people have used the process, because I'm not in touch with all those people, and some of them have worked with dozens, or in some cases hundreds of individuals, and I'll never know. So we don't know. We know that the thousands of people have done it all around the world. And we've been doing workshops in Israel on this methodology since 2009. We actually have one next week, which I'll tell you about later. But yeah, so it's been used by a lot of people. The success rate at finding your purpose, it used to be lower. We now have it up to about 90%. So if we had all of you in a room for 3 days, 90% of you would be able to talk with this internal thing and walk away with purpose statements that we had tested as accurate at the end. Or more. Last workshop was like 98%, but I promised 90. Yeah. How do you test it? So I gave you one of the tests. Good. So one of the tests I talked about was you use it and you watch for all that synchronicity, all that stuff showing, all that things happening, and your own passion level. That's one test. Good, but there are other tests that don't require like waiting 3 or 4 days. The other test you can use is you can actually look back at your life and see evidence that has been your purpose previously. Right? And you can also notice your own physical and emotional reactions to it and test it that way. Right? An accurate purpose generates strong reactions in the person whose purpose it is, and also usually in other people as well. So there's a whole bunch of different ways of checking to see whether it's true or not. Or whether it's a good choice if you're in category B. Good. Cool. One more question, then I'm going to dive into the leadership and organization. Good. Yeah, so what happens if the purpose is too general, right? And the purpose, you can see some of those purpose statements are fairly high level. So there's a certain amount of strategy that you need to come up with. How am I going to go about manifesting this purpose? And I always encourage that people do that first through the activities they're already doing. So that requires some thought. How do I apply this purpose to this job or this project? Right? So there's 2 basic ways to do that. One is to ask the same thing that told you your purpose for advice about that. And it usually has really good advice. But that advice only goes so far, and the rest of it you have to figure out for yourself or get somebody to help you figure out. And then there's a certain amount of trial and error involved. And usually, just the first small efforts that you make in that direction will usually produce good results and inspire people to keep going. So we try to get them to do something soon, so that, because if you don't do anything, then you'll just fall back into fear and forget the whole thing, basically. Does that make sense? Good. I'll take more questions a little later, but I wanted to touch on a few of these other topics. This kind of gives you a good sense of how it works for an individual. Now, I talked to you before about one way that leaders use their purpose, and that is that if you're a leader, if you're fulfilling your purpose while you lead, you don't have to say or do anything else. The people who work for you will be inspired and want to follow you. If you want to increase that effect, you tell them what your purpose is. And you use it in decision-making out loud instead of doing it in your mind. Well, my purpose is this, therefore we're going to go left, not right. Okay? Or my purpose is this, therefore I'm naturally biased towards this option. What do you think? So being transparent about the fact that you have a purpose and it's influencing your decision-making is more inspiring to people than keeping it to yourself. Another way leaders use it, and this is one of the reasons politicians hire me, is that there's an aspect of purpose called the message, the messer, which you can then use in speaking and writing. I have one client who's he was a minister in Colombia, and he would use his purpose in speaking all the time. He was a very highly rated public speaker, and actually wound up using his purpose to be a lead negotiator with the narco-terrorists and create the peace agreement in Colombia. So he spent a lot of time in Cuba at the tables talking. We had to use special security measures when we have our coaching calls because the Cuban government was listening in on all the stuff we were doing. So that's another way that leaders use their purpose, right? And so I've had Israeli politicians hire me. Someone had fallen on hard times, hired me to get a new message to get reelected, and he was successfully reelected using his new message. Unfortunately, I can't tell you which one. So feel free to pick whichever one you want to blame on me and pretend it's that one. So I've had people do that before. Good. So these are ways to integrate it into leadership. The other way that companies use it is they use it for employee engagement, marketing, and strategy. And in this case, we're looking at the purpose of an organization. And now the employees are getting together and asking the question of this same internal part of themselves, what is the purpose of the organization? And we collect up all the answers and test them using the same tests we use on the individual purpose. And out of that, so far, 100% of the time, we'll see how long that lasts. We've done it a bunch of times and it's never failed. Out comes a really inspiring mission statement. Right? Much more powerful than the usual organizational mission statements that then you use to inspire the employees. Because now, and this is what folks like conscious capitalism are in favor of, is that a for-profit company should be actively trying to make the world a better place in some way. They should have a clear strategy for how they're improving the planet or improving people's lives. And if you do that, you will get more loyal customers, more loyal employees than if you're just trying to earn more profit for the people who own the company. And it makes perfect sense when you hear it, but somehow economists missed it for a couple hundred years. But this is now becoming very, very common. But it's very difficult, right? If you sit in a room and try to come up with it, any of you ever done that? Sit in a room and try to come up with a compelling, inspiring organizational purpose? How'd it go? What's that? Not so well. Yeah, it's really hard, right? You spend days and days and days brainstorming and racking your brains and come up with something really mediocre. It's very hard. This method, much faster, much more powerful purposes come out of it at the end. So a lot of times I'm hired for the organization rather than for an individual leader. Last topic, Israel's purpose. People ask me, why do you keep coming to Israel, Tim? I've been here 20 plus times. I've lost track. I've been coming since 2009. Are you Jewish? That's the other question I get a lot. Are you Jewish, Tim? Tim Kelly? That doesn't sound... Kelly is Irish. I'm not Jewish. I'm Scottish and Irish. Good. But I come because it's my own purpose, right? I'm trying to change the world. How many of you are change agents? You feel personally motivated to try to create a better world? Good. Now, I want to point out that video we saw at the beginning, right? That was about that, right? This exploring the unknown. This is Tel Aviv University's new ייעוד, right? That they're now looking at how do we make the process of teaching people more purposeful, which I'm really glad to see, because education is normally done the way it's done for historical reasons that no one remembers. Right? Why do we teach these subjects in this order this way? Well, because that's how I learned when I was a kid. Right? So I'm glad to see, a few cutting-edge schools actually really taking on this idea of purpose and say, well, if that were our purpose, how would we educate differently? A really good question. Right? So, if you personally feel motivated to change the world, then the purpose is actually an essential mandatory tool for you, because it's the instructions on which part of the world to change and how. So my instructions included transforming Israel. I said, great, inner source. How's that supposed to work exactly? And it said, find Israel's higher purpose, Israel's ייעוד. I failed miserably? I just started. I've only been at it a year. Give me a little time. What we've done so far is we've got about 250 people through the country version of this process, where we get them together in groups of 20 to 50 people, and then we connect them with this source and ask them about Israel's purpose. We take all the answers, test them the same way we do for an organization, and at the end, every single time, we get a single answer out of the group that everyone aligns on. And this is groups of people where we've got rabbis, settlers, secular, leftist Tel Aviv types, all in the same room. Arabs, like all together. People who can't agree on what time of day it is, agreeing on Israel's purpose. So far it's going really well. Good. And if you're interested, write Purpose of Israel on a card or give it to me. And they can. That's one of the things that they've used. Yeah. One guy used David Ben-Gurion. What's that? Technologies that will save the world. Well, saving the world comes up a lot when we talk about the purpose of Israel. You get Tikkun Olam and Or LaGoim and all this kind of stuff comes up every time, right? Whether we're talking about technology or not. That's not usually the purpose statements that come out at the end, but it always comes up. And the purpose is always about creating a better world in some way. But that's normal. It should be about that. Good. So if you're curious and interested in that, we'd be happy to have you participate and help out with Israel's purpose. We're going to need a lot of people to help us find Israel's purpose in order for it to work, in order for it to take. Good. And I promised you one other thing, which is I would talk briefly about the workshop next week. Next week, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, we have a 3-day workshop. We're finishing at like 1 in the afternoon on Friday so people can get home for Shabbat. We have a 3-day workshop about individual higher purpose. Right? So if as a result of this, you feel motivated to find your own purpose, that's your first opportunity. You can do it next week. And I'm told it's less expensive than most similar workshops here in Israel. And we would love to have you there. And is Revital here? There's Revital. Revital can answer questions about that workshop. And if you want to talk about organizational purpose or stuff like that, I'm probably a better person to talk to. And Einat, is Einat here? There's Einat. You can also talk to Einat. Good. Any other questions? I'm going to wrap up in just a few minutes, but I want to see if there's any questions that came out of the country or the organizational or the leadership topics. Yes, ma'am. No, I can't do that either, because you might be able to figure out which politician. Yes, don't tell me which politician, but tell me his purpose. Can't do that. Sorry. He or she. Good. Other questions? Ones I can answer? Where's the workshop? Where's the workshop? Enveret, next to Kadima. That's where it is. Good. Yes? She has a question. You raise your hand for her. Good. Good. So if the purpose changes over time, how do you do it the second time or the third time? The answer is it's much quicker. Like you can do it in, I do it in under an hour usually, revise the purpose. And what you have to do is there's a simple exercise you have to do to make sure you've reduced your fear level low enough that you can have the conversation with yourself. And then what you do is you say there's up to 4 purpose statements in this method. So you say each purpose statement out loud, notice your reaction, and the ones that don't produce a strong reaction need to be revised. And then you go back and ask the same thing you asked the first time. Great, give me the new versions of this and this. Try saying those out loud. If they get a strong reaction, you're done. So it's really quick. Good. And last question. Yes, sir? Yes. So the question is, how do you identify actual learning organizations versus learning organizations that claim to be learning organizations but actually aren't? Okay? And by the way, you'll see the same thing with purposeful organizations. We're very purposeful, and some are and some aren't. This is called, in climate change, they call this greenwashing, right? Where you give the appearance of caring about the environment for marketing reasons. Okay? Good. With the purpose, it's easy. Because when they say what their purpose is, if you're not inspired by it, you're done. It's very simple. Okay? With the learning organization, here's the test, is they should be able to show you that they have learning plans for everybody, and that that's their primary measure of success. Now, does profit matter? Absolutely. But the companies that are actually doing that don't have to worry as much about profit, because people who are learning and growing, devoted to learning every day, produce a lot of profit as a side effect. Yeah, they do. They have learning-oriented performance indicators. I just met with a guy last week. I was at a holacracy workshop with him. Now, this was a few weeks ago, because I also teach non-hierarchical organizational structures to leaders. And he had a learning organization, and he was spending a year, this is the leader, traveling around the world doing workshops and stuff like that. And his employees, there was a requirement if you worked for him that 20% of your time was spent learning. So 1 day out of 5 a week, no work, only learning. Now I don't need to hear any more about whether he's serious or not. He's clearly serious. If you read it on the website and then you start asking questions and it all sort of fizzles away, then it's not serious. Good. This is a very millennial question. Raise your hand if you were born after 1980. Good. So y'all are more purpose-oriented as a group, it seems, than previous generations. You guys are into it much younger. And millennials will vote with their dollars on which products they buy, which companies they work for, right? If they don't like the values or the purpose or the vision or the mission of the organization, they won't spend money on it, and they'll quit. Right? Happens a lot. Yes? Yeah. How do you know you got to your purpose? Try it. See what happens. Good. Yeah, if you're a 4, if you feel happy enough and you feel fulfilled and motivated and it's not dissipating, keep going. I don't know. Is it? You tell me. Is something missing? Why'd you come to this talk? If you feel something is missing, then you should be seeking it, even if you're a 4. It's more fun to look for the missing thing when you're at a 4 than a 2. Much more fun. Don't wait. Thank you all so much for your time. I'm happy to answer more questions. If you want to come up here, feel free to ask Einat or Revital as well. And thank you to Tel Aviv University and to United Airlines for making this happen.